Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. When I was first told to be a speaker in this event, I felt that I needed to do something different because healthcare is not something that is commonly discussed in such fora. If my preceding speaker, Mr. Sharma, felt an odd man out, I think I stick out like a sore thumb. However, I got to thinking that what do thinkers do? They think. And what does thinking result in? It results in change, in evolution. So I thought I would say a few words on how healthcare is going to evolve into the future, which is why there is the crystal ball for us to gaze into. Now, when we start talking about the future and the evolution, I think we should look back to give us a context. Right. This is something that we see often, the evolution of man. I put in the next slide because I agree that there are different ways of interpreting evolution and different views of how things might turn out in the future. This is equally valid way of representing evolution in human beings. Now, healthcare and its delivery, like everything else, we've discussed almost everything under the sun, like everything else around us is changing continuously and evolving very rapidly. To put it into perspective, I'll use the example of the organization I belong to, Apollo Group, because it'll allow us to have some reference points. Apollo started as a group 30 years ago. And the first sentence in the mission statement says, our mission is to bring healthcare of international standards within the reach of every individual. So what did Apollo Group do to fulfill its mission? It involved the best doctors, gave them the latest infrastructure, assimilated new ideas, techniques, equipment, and created hospitals where people all over the country, even neighboring countries, came to for treatment. So what it achieved over these 30 years is building brilliant hospitals where people come to for treatment. It no longer is unique. There are many other companies, other groups that have followed in its footsteps, and there is now a resurgence of healthcare in India, which is moving towards better and better facilities for its citizen. However, to me, for our mission statement, we are only halfway there. And I'll come back to it at the very end to say why I say this. 30 years ago, again, to set a perspective, if you look at the healthcare scenario then, laparoscopic surgery, which we take as standard now, was still only 3 years old. Sorry, it was still 5 years away. The first laparoscopic surgery worldwide took place in 1988. MRI scanners were just 3 years old. The first heart transplant in India was still 11 years away. That's how far back we were. And the first test tube baby in India was to be born 3 years later. And a non-healthcare parameter, the now ubiquitous laptop, shared the same birth year with Apollo Group. So that is what it was 30 years ago. Now, right. Now, this is the journey of healthcare as it happened over the 30 years. There have been many changes. Now, these are my personal views, the 3 game changers. There might be others who would emphasize on other areas. But for me, the three game changers was that the investigations have enabled doctors to look inside the body and its internal environment. This was not available before the advent of ultrasound, of CT scanners, of MRIs, of 3D reconstructions. So currently, even without actually getting inside the body, doctors can have an idea of what's going on inside. Minimally invasive surgeries and techniques in radiology and in therapeutic interventions have made medicine much less painful and much less of a forbidding thing. We all know about minimal invasive surgery like gallbladder surgeries and hernias, etc. But minimally invasive surgery also includes putting in a stent into a blocked artery, because you don't need to operate, you don't need to cut open, you can enter through a vein, and you can put a stent or do a plasty. Radiologically, you can put in stents under radiological guidance, and that again limits the requirement for surgery. So that has been something that has changed the way medicine has developed over the last 30 years. Finally, I would like to bring into focus that, like a lot of other things, medicine also has shifted to more evidence-based practice rather than experience-based. I hasten to add, I'm not belittling experience in any way, but experience tends to be incidental or episodic, whereas a structured protocol that is accepted by majority is something that is evidence-based and is replicable. So for me, these are the three game changers that has taken place in the last 30 years. I say this only as a backdrop, as a context of what I want to say next. How many of you would be able to identify this gentleman? I'm sure there would be some. If anybody is feeling shy, this is Arthur C. Clarke, one of the people who I find has been one of the greatest thinkers in a non-philosophical way. One of the greatest practical thinkers, if I may say so. He's the one who well before its time, talked about geostationary satellites for communications, about personal computers, about the concept of internet, about 3D printing, believe it or not, and robotic surgery, where he predicted that surgeries would be performed across continents. The surgeon need not be present in the same room as the patient. He had actually said that. I have put up his picture because what I'm going to say now may look as outlandish as what he said sounded when he said it. So again, there will be a huge number of changes in medicine. We are not here to be able to predict each and every one of them. I'll go by the rule of three and talk about the next three, which I feel are going to make a huge difference. Again, investigations will move to the next phase, in the sense that the focus, instead of being structure, looking at the structure of the body, is going to move more and more into looking at the functioning of the body. So thereby, it is now going to look at the functioning and the malfunctioning, instead of looking at the results of the malfunctioning on the structures. Currently, we look at a CT scan and we see that there is an abscess inside, but when we look at the functioning, we'll also look at the area from where the abscess is forming and how it is forming. The investigations will also move a step downwards into the cellular and molecular level. Previously, when we did blood tests, we would look at hormone levels, levels of certain proteins in the body. But now we look instead at molecular level, cellular level results, which shows us genetic variations, which shows us receptors on tumor cells, which shows us the cellular structure of the lining of, say, a body organ, like nowadays with endoscopy. You can not only see what it looks like inside, you can actually look at it and identify malignant areas without taking biopsy. So that is the kind of thing that will become more and more prevalent. It is not a fact yet, in the sense that you do not actually have diagnostic proof. But very soon, over the next 5 years, I would think that that would be possible. A biopsy would not be required. Treatment will be customized and tailor-made. Now, when I say that, it might sound a bit stupid, but you think of tailor-made clothes. Previously, we used to go to a tailor, and he used to take measurements, and he used to stitch it to our requirements. Then we moved on to mass-produced garments, because that ensured quality. The same thing happened in healthcare. We moved into mass healthcare, or what I would call conveyor belt healthcare, because it was standardized and it provided quality. But just as a Sabyasachi or, I'm not very good at it, but Manish Malhotra has a far greater premium today than a standard market brand, similarly, customization is going to become the buzzword, in the sense, just like the tailor measures you, you would undergo investigations that would measure your actual biochemical patterns and the body and the way that your body is functioning or malfunctioning. You, not what happens generally. And medicines or treatment would be tailored accordingly. It is, in a way, a throwback to what the homeopathist or the Ayurveda specialist would do, in that they would take a very detailed history of things completely unrelated. Like, you go with a stomachache, they'll ask you, do you sweat? Do you sleep well? Do you have appetite for unusual things? They were trying to create a milieu that was you and customize their treatment accordingly, not go for a shotgun approach. So gradually, I think that is going to make a comeback, and we will have tailor-made medicine. The process of healthcare delivery will be greatly changed by, and I have put in eclectic collection of things, electronic, material, and information technology. I've said this because one of the things that will make a huge difference is going to be sensors. There are going to be sensors that will be attached to human bodies, which will take readings which you normally would need to go to the doctor to have the readings taken or have some investigation done. Transcutaneous sensors are already being able to pick up things like blood sugar. Gradually, they will pick up more and more complex molecules and give a more clear picture of the internal milieu. Material, in the sense that nanotechnology will be able to provide vehicles for drug molecules. You see, if the investigation can identify a tumor cell that has a particular receptor on its surface, then we could devise materials that would interact with that receptor. In other words, carry the drug molecule only to its intended point of delivery. So material is going to be very important as well. Information technology would be something that we have not really even touched the tip of it in terms of use in healthcare. What I foresee is that information technology will enable patients to be in contact with the doctor continuously, especially chronic patients. It has been seen over the last 20 years or so that the pattern of disease is changing worldwide. We are changing to what is known as lifestyle diseases, which are primarily chronic in nature. And what information technology will enable us to do is to have a close monitoring between the doctor and the patient, and eventually also enable the doctor to trigger off change in the treatment. For example, if you have a depot of drugs that is injected once a month or filled up once a month, and the rate of delivery of the drug could be modulated from a distance, remotely. So, I have spoken about the differences that will take place in the investigation and the treatment, so I will not elaborate it further. The effect that I expect will have on healthcare delivery is that patients will need to visit hospitals much more infrequently than they need to do now. The inpatient stay will decrease significantly because less interventional techniques will be used. Surgery will probably be, I'm a surgeon by training, surgery will probably be the first discipline that vanishes. The hospitals will require less beds, less OTs, and hugely developed diagnostics. It doesn't mean that in India the hospitals will get smaller because there's a huge latent demand, but maybe the growth or requirement for growth will be less. And while the cost of individual treatment, for example, doing a mapping or genetic mapping of a human being is going to be high, but a lifetime healthcare spending will decrease. Say, if you can find out a gene that is triggering off your asthma and you can manipulate it, then for the rest of your life, you do not have asthma, you don't need to be admitted, you don't need to have medication. So your lifetime cost will decrease. And the treatment will move more into the community. In other words, healthcare will move to the people. This brings me back to what Apollo has achieved so far. They have built institutions where people come to for getting their healthcare. In the next 30 years, I foresee that healthcare will go to the people, and that is when we will be able to fulfill the first sentence in Dr. Pratap Reddy's vision in Apollo. Thank you.